Okay, I've been thinking out loud. My thought is, why is it that I believe in creation and a young earth? And why is it important to me? Because throughout my life, there haven't been a huge number of people that have really believed, certainly in the young age of the world, but also really in creation, that God created the world and that He did it where there was an apt description that He could give to it as very good, that there was no sin, there was no suffering, there was no death. And that fits in perfectly with the young age of the world, and that the world that then was perfect, and it changed upon sin entering into it, just as God said that the day that mankind, men and women, sin, that sin will enter in, and the direct result of that is death. Death is inextricably linked with sin. The two go hand in hand. The soul that sins shall die, and there needs to be a sacrifice. Therefore, Jesus Christ, the perfect sacrifice. But why is it that this is so important? Well, it struck me just the other day that the biggest question that really is ever asked is not so much is there a God, but if there is a God, why is all the suffering going on? So we ask the question about suffering. We're more interested in why is there suffering in the world. We don't want to jump back that little stage to the acknowledgement and therefore the accountability that there is a God. We jump slightly to the left or to the right of that, and we concentrate really on the question of suffering. Why is there suffering in the world? And then we may come to the conclusion it's just the way that it is, or like if there is a God, he's not actually God because he can't deal with it, just the way that it is, or that God isn't capable of dealing with it, so he's not really God. So we annul God with our thinking ultimately. So we jump slightly away from the question, which is most important, is the acknowledgement of God, who, what God is like, who God is, his nature. Nature perhaps not being quite the right word, character. And we jump to the question, oh, about the suffering and about death, and we cry and we pretend that it isn't there. So the age of the earth is really important, and creation is really important, because it struck me just the other day that in the book of Job, well worth reading, which you might think, and I might have thought, was just all about suffering. It isn't. When God answers after the world, i.e., the three friends of Job and this strange character called Elihu, when they've had their go, when the world's had its go at answering the questions and coming to its conclusions, God answers Job in all of his sufferings, and his friends and this other chap, Elihu, in their philosophizing. He answers Job and he speaks to them all, and he says, in a way, two things. He says, you're speaking nonsense. Except for Job, he's not really speaking nonsense, but you're speaking nonsense. And then he says to everybody, to them, but to us, this is the creation, young earth bit. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. God goes on in all of his answers to answer nothing about suffering and everything about creation. Creation and young earth belief are inextricably linked to the one quest of man is to be still and to know God. Thought for the day.